Welcome back to Mentor Nation, the podcast for entrepreneurs looking for real mentorship, real strategies, and real stories so that you can go out and build your dreams. I'm your host, John Abbas, and it's time for another episode, so buckle your seatbelt and let's go. Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Mentor Nation podcast, the only podcast on earth where we interview awesome entrepreneurs to get their best wisdom and practical strategies. Actually, I am just kidding. There are many, many podcasts that do just that, but hopefully those of you listening all know that I strive every day to get better and better until one day, someone, somewhere says that the Mentor Nation podcast is the best on the planet, even if it's my mom. Just kidding. Anyway, it's John Abbas here, and I wanted to have a little bit of fun in the beginning of this because the guest that I have for you today is really a ton of fun, and she's just a blast. She's bright, she's funny, and she is a major difference maker who is going to give you a whole new outlook after this interview is over. Jennifer Fulwiler is a mom of 6 kids, literally back-to-back-to-back kids. She's a stand-up comedian and an author of 3 books, including her new book, which is a best-selling phenomenon called Your Blue Flame, Drop the Guilt, and Do What Makes You Come Alive. Believe it or not, the way I found her was I went on Amazon, clicked business, clicked on top 10 bestsellers, and hers was in the top 10, and I reached out to her cold, and she responded, and that led to an awesome interview that you're about to listen to. Now, the title of her book is really interesting considering that she just did exactly that. That's in the title. After growing up atheist most of her life, Jennifer found religion, went on to become a full-time host of a wildly popular show on Sirius XM. And after a few years of doing that, making money, things were good, she quit cold turkey to become a stand-up comedian. It's crazy because, talk about a scary decision, right? Like giving up your only source of income with 6 kids to pursue a dream. Think about that. Can you imagine doing that? Not knowing if an audience will like you, if you'll be able to make enough money to pay the bills, if you have what it takes. The good news is she started selling out shows and her itinerary filled up quickly all around the country. When Jennifer is not making people fall out of their seats laughing, she's inspiring them to pursue their dreams and their goals, even if they have families, responsibilities, or they think it's too late. This is an awesome interview that I think all of us need to hear. So without further ado, please help me welcome Jennifer Fulwiler. All right, Jennifer, thank you so much for being on the Mentor Nation podcast. I've been really looking forward to this interview, and it's just a pleasure to have you.
I am so excited to be here.
Me too. So I've got to tell the audience a little bit of a backstory before we get into the interview, just kind of how this interview came to be. So my fiance loved your book, by the way. And
I love hearing that.
That's how I discovered you. And obviously, I reached out because you cover a really important topic for a lot of people. And I know we're going to speak a lot about that. But, typically I'll shoot an email out, and then when I hear back or we get a confirmation, I'll start doing research. And so when I got confirmation from, I think it was your assistant, I started doing research on you, and holy crap. I've researched a lot of people, and I mean this, some came from crazy backgrounds and had crazy upbringings and experiences, but I've just, me personally, I've never read a more interesting story. And I mean that, I don't know if I'm covering everything, but you were an atheist your whole life. You became Catholic. You had 6 kids literally back to back, which is in itself a feat. You've written 3 books, including the one that we're going to talk about today. You had a 2-hour show on Sirius Radio, which you quit cold turkey. And now you're this incredible, inspirational speaker and author, also a hilarious comedian traveling, doing stand-up. Did I cover everything?
Yeah, I guess that's about it. We have a dog too. You could throw that in.
7 kids.
Right. Exactly.
Wow. So before we get into the book, I need you to please share, if you don't mind, just a condensed version of your story and like, how did you end up here doing what you do now?
I'm so glad you asked that. It was the condensed version is, I mean, in terms of the faith component, again, I was raised in a wonderful atheist family, and it was really important to us to be good people. And just like, I mean, I'm friends with many atheists, and it was just we had the kind of feeling of like, hey, we just want to be good people for the sake of itself, not because the book tells us to be good people. And that was our idea.
Right.
And then after my first child was born, and by the way, when I was younger, I didn't think I'd have kids. It didn't seem like something that was for me. I have zero domestic skills. It's funny. I always tell people I'm not a baby person. I still don't know anything about babies. Having 6 kids has only confirmed for me that I don't know anything about babies. And so when I was younger, I thought, I never volunteered to babysit or work with young kids. That just wasn't my thing. And so I said, I don't think I'll have kids. And then, after I got married, that kind of changed. And by the way, my husband is the one with the interesting story. He grew up dirt poor, raised by a single mother, and she had no educational background at all. But she told him like, hey, maybe you won't be poor if you get an education. So he went to Yale undergrad, graduated in 3 years with honors, Columbia Law School, Stanford Business School, and studied in the Master's Computer Science program at Stanford just for the fun of it while he was there. So that's my husband. He's crazier than I am. And so when our first kid was born, I just started questioning a lot of things about my faith and the world and the meaning of life and all that sort of thing. And so like the absolute nerd I am, I just started researching. I just started reading and researching. And my husband was like, you got to stop reading this Catholic stuff. That's a cult. You got to stay away from that nonsense. But long story short, we both ended up becoming Catholic at the same time. And then we had 6 kids. The person who never thought she'd have kids ended up having 6 babies in 8 years. So there you go.
My gosh. Now I have to ask this, like you and your husband probably never get bored, okay. I will say, yeah, there are a lot of things that happen in this house. Boredom is not one of them because it's a small house too. It's a 3-bedroom house, 1,900 square feet with all these people in it. And not only was I an only child, but my husband is an only child. Neither one of us grew up with siblings. And so every day we're like, what's happening? What even is this? That's insane. And I'm assuming that led, obviously the radio show came about because that's a great story, right? Like you grew up atheist for a very long time. And then if somebody with your background and your mindset can completely shift, was that what your talk show was about?
My talk show was kind of about just pop culture from my perspective as just a mom in the suburbs. And it was just kind of my, tried to be funny, like funny takes on pop culture and what's going on in the world. I was sort of like your smack talking friend who sits in the passenger seat of your car and just like talk smack with you as you drive around. So like that was kind of the feeling of that show. And I loved it. And I'm still friends with everyone at SiriusXM. It was just one of those things. And this kind of touches on the blue flame concept that I just felt like, well, initially I felt like the time was right for a change because my stand-up comedy tour was so successful and it just kind of made me feel like time was right for a change. And then when touring got shut down because of COVID, I kind of assumed I wouldn't quit my job, but the gut instinct was still there, even though touring wasn't an option. And so I took a leap and I did it.
I don't know if anybody's ever told you this, and I think he might live in Austin too, but you literally remind me of the female JP Sears. Like, do you know who that is?
I know the name. You know what? I need to look him up. And Sears is spelled a way you wouldn't expect, right?
No, it's right. It's SEARS, but he's hilarious because I was watching some of your stand-up yesterday and I was dying laughing. And I was just like, man, she reminds me of somebody that I really like. And then it just hit me. And I'm pretty sure he lives in Austin too.
Oh, I got it. That's right. I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay. It's hilarious. And so I didn't mean to shift gears there, but your stand-up is hilarious. Everybody listening, you guys need to go to YouTube and just look up some of the things. They're really, really funny. And I know you're going to crush it on your tour. But today, obviously, we're going to talk about your book. The title of it is Your Blue Flame, Drop the Guilt and Do What Makes You Come Alive. And I'm so excited about this topic, and I'll get into why in just a little bit. But can you share with everyone, what exactly is a blue flame?
Yeah, so the idea behind a blue flame is it's some talent that you have. It's some work that you do. It's something that you create, that you contribute to the world. And by create, I mean, it could be like having meaningful conversations with people. It doesn't have to be a product. But I make that distinction because sometimes people will say, being a dad is my blue flame, or being a mom is my blue flame. I want to distinguish that it is something specific that you produce and create. I always tell people our relationships they're too sacred to conflate with the work that comes with it. So right. For my friend who initially said being a mom was her blue flame, of course, obviously, we all love our kids. Like, it's the most important thing in the world. But what she realized is the blue flame work that she was really connecting with is she loves home organization. And so now that she's in a season when her kids are about to be old enough to go off and go to college, and she said, wow, I'm glad I distinguished that, because now that I realize that home organization is really a blue flame for me. And that's why I had initially said being a mom is my blue flame. She said, now I can continue that work in different ways, even when my children are adults and outside of the home. So it's some kind of quote unquote work that you do. Again, you don't have to be paid for it at all.
Sure.
And the biggest thing is that it makes the world a better place. So getting pedicures and manicures, that cannot be a blue flame, no matter how much you love it. Like, it's something that serves other people, but it gives you energy when you do it. And that's why this is such an important concept for busy people like you, John, like me, that when I first really got into this concept, it was like 3 kids under age 3. And then I had 4 kids under age 5. And I was writing was the blue flame I was using at that time. And people would say, Jen, you're insane. Why would you add more work to your life right now? Why would you work on a book right now when you have so much else going on? And what I tried to explain was, no, it's not. This isn't work for me. I actually have more energy to go cook dinner or deal with my 2 daughters hitting each other with baby dolls, or, whatever it is. Right. I have more energy for that now that I'm using this blue flame.
That's awesome. Now, was there a particular experience in your life that led you to this book and turning it into a concept?
Yeah, it was. Well, my previous book was called One Beautiful Dream, and it was a memoir of how I learned to pursue my own passions, like writing and things like that, in the midst of having all these babies. And ultimately, I intended for that book to be kind of a rallying cry for moms to say, hey, just because you have all these kids, you're going to hear this advice of quote unquote, put your life on hold, set your passions aside. And I really disagree with that advice. I think that moms need a voice in the marketplace of ideas. I think that they have a lot of great things to contribute and say. And I'm kind of tired of people saying that to moms with young children. So that memoir was kind of a rallying cry. And only 2 times in the whole book did I use the term blue flame. I said it totally in passing. I just said this work for me was a blue flame. So it gave me energy. And it's funny, I said all these things in the book, John, that I thought were very moving and very powerful. The only thing anyone wanted to talk about is they said, whoa, wait. What's with the blue flame thing? People were using the hashtag. I didn't even make the hashtag a thing. Other people started it. And so it's just sort of grew out of, honestly, it was just demand. Like, I kind of didn't have a choice but to write a book called Blue Flame.
That's awesome. Now, I think you already kind of answered this, but I just wanted to get clarification. There can be like several blue flames, right? Like it's really anything that makes you come alive, and there's parameters around, it's got to make a difference, but there can be several instead of just like, you're not talking about one big thing that's really your life's purpose or calling, right? You're talking about...
you're exactly right. And in fact, I did an entire chapter on how important it is to understand that we don't just have one flame. The vast majority of us have more than one, and it can transform. And the example I give of why that's so important is my grandfather was an engineer who built refineries, and that was his blue flame. He loved every aspect of it. And then when he was in his early 50s, he ate some bad seafood. He got hepatitis. He came so close to death, the doctors actually gave him up for dead. They said, there's no way this man survives this.
Wow.
He did survive, but it was so physically devastating to him that he couldn't go back to work. And so I say, if that guy, 52 years old, can know, he was, this big refinery manager, vigorous, like walking around doing his work. If he thought that that was his only blue flame, that was his one true calling, and then that was it for him, he would have gone into despair. He would have had a massive midlife crisis. Instead, he developed a new blue flame of cooking. He used his time. He made a little stool for himself to sit in the kitchen, engineer, like made this custom stool, and he had to sit most of the time, but he would do things like make a chocolate cake for 22 days in a row until he perfected the recipe. And this was around the time of my birth. I never knew my grandfather, the engineer. I only knew my grandfather, the chef. And he never made a dime from his work, cooking this food. But it was such a blessing to our family. It's a beautiful blue flame. And he could have missed that if he thought that he only had this one true blue flame of being an engineer.
Gotcha. Man, that makes a lot of sense. And, as your book came in yesterday, and I read half of it yesterday, and I loved it. But there are parts in there that it really hit a nerve, because you cover something that's like really crucial, in my opinion, but it's just like people are scared to talk about it, whether it's a mom or somebody's in a career. It's like, you don't see people ever telling their friend or coworker that I feel trapped. Like I feel like I'm stuck doing something for money or to pay the bills and raising a family, when my real passion is this. It's like something people don't usually talk about. They just literally suppress it over and over and over. And so it's awesome that you're bringing that topic out, because I feel like it's something that people, they suppress so much, they just tend to not even think about it anymore. And so I want to ask you, what advice do you have for someone that feels stuck and that really just doesn't know like how to change it?
Yeah. One of the things that I really recommend, and by the way, I haven't told anyone else this, but I think I know what the next book will be, because the last chapter in the book is called Blow It Up. And that's the one. So for this book, that's the thing that everyone's talking about. For my last book, Blue Flame was the thing everyone was talking about. For this book, everyone's talking about this idea of blow it up. And I get this from my husband, and I talk about sometimes that we have made some radical changes. Even this isn't in the book, but most recently, me quitting my radio job to take a big bet on this comedy touring stuff. Mm-hmm. And the idea behind Blow It Up, you don't have to quit your job. It doesn't have to be something big, but you just say, first of all, I'm going to get real about what I want. Because like you just pointed out, so often we won't even admit to ourselves what we really want or what we really feel meant to do, like what our real purpose probably is that we were put on this earth to do, because we don't see a way to make it happen. So we kind of think, well, might as well not even think about that. Like if you're a mom with young kids and secretly inside you think your destiny is to be an ultramarathon runner, but you're like, I've got all these little kids. I do not see how that could possibly happen. So like you said, you stuff it in and you stuff it in, and you tell yourself not to think about it. Well, when you're in blow it up mentality, you say, you know what? I'm getting a journal, I'm getting a notebook, I'm getting the notes app on my phone, and I'm going to actually write down what it is I really want, and what it is I really feel like I'm meant to do. Maybe I don't see a way to get this done, but I'm just going to get real about what I want. And then you start to brainstorm and you say, okay, well, what would that look like if I could become an ultramarathon runner? I mean, I don't see a way to make this work, but no bad ideas in brainstorming. What would that look like? You just start to work through that, and you leave nothing off limits. So one of the things that my husband and I had to do early on is we really felt like we were on the wrong track in the corporate world, but we had a really expensive mortgage payment and we had an expensive car payment. So, and we kept saying, oh, we hate our jobs, we hate our lives, this work isn't meaningful, we're not adding anything to the world. And we were like, man, but got to stick with it, got to pay this mortgage, got to make the car payment. And then we just had this moment where we looked at each other, we said, what if we sold the house? What if we sold the car? So we sold the house, we sold the car, and we moved in with my mom. Like we were both in our 30s, and we moved in with my mom. And that's what it looks like that's what it looks like when you are in a blow it up mentality. So it doesn't have to be something huge like quitting jobs and moving in with parents. But what I do encourage people to do is be very honest about what you really want, and then just do some brainstorming about what it might take to get there. And you can start small.
Yeah. Now you have a process I saw in the book that you take people through. Could you explain that a little bit? Like you have them ask questions and take, a few minutes on each question.
Yeah,
I don't want to spoil the book, but
I'm happy to share anything from the book. So I recommend that people ask themselves 7 questions, and I always say just do it on cocktail napkins, do it on a paper towel, grab a crayon. Don't be a perfectionist about this. And the big thing is, I encourage them to set a timer for 3 minutes and keep writing for the full 3 minutes, because that will help you break through your mental blocks on these issues. And this is for discovering your blue flame. So right. I ask questions like, what did you do for fun when you were a kid? Just write for 3 minutes, even if you don't see how it could be relevant to today. And the example I give is when I did that exercise, this is so embarrassing to admit, but honestly, my hobby in the summers, when I was a kid, this was before caller ID. So it was prank calling. I would literally all summer, I'd have my friends gather around and I'd prank call people.
I did the same exact thing. I swear. So I would call my best friend and I would literally call Terminex on 3-way. He would call Orkin. Yeah, he would call Orkin on 3-way, and then we'd merge the calls and have them talk to each other. And they're like,
legend.
It's
legend.
So funny. That's so funny you said that. Sorry to interrupt.
No. Oh, that I just, now I want a redo on my childhood that I didn't think about that. I'm like, I am already thinking of a list of businesses that I would have called and done that with. That's incredible. That's amazing. So what's interesting is, so that was on my list. And so I was about to just scratch it off like, haha, prank calling. But then I thought, well, what does my absolute love of prank calling tell me about gifts that I have, about talents that I have? And I realized I like using words. I like verbal communication. I like thinking on my feet. I like complicated interpersonal situations. And what's funny is I ended up being a 2-hour live daily talk radio host. And if I had done this exercise earlier, I honestly think I would have pursued podcasting or talk radio earlier in life if I just spent some time meditating on, I really did love prank calling. And so on podcasting is like that's like the new form of prank calling, right? It's like we're saying crazy things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you can get paid a lot of money for it. You can
right. Yeah. Both are equally lucrative. Yeah.
That's right, man. That's really awesome. I'll share a personal story too, because as I was reading through your book, me and my fiance, we visited this a little while back. She's in real estate and I own a large daycare center here in Nashville, and my passion has always been movies, and I've just put it to the side for years, and hers has been fashion. She always wanted to create a clothing line, and so I love these exercises because we've been pursuing them kind of on the side, but we never had a framework for it, right? Like we were just like, well, let's just set aside a little bit of time here and there, but we never took the time to like really identify and see what that looks like. So I really love that your book goes through that.
And I want everyone also to connect with a sense of mission, to say, you were meant to do this. And I always tell people, don't get intimidated by the word mission. It doesn't mean that your fiance has to take out $1 million loan and have a, big storefront on the main street in Nashville. If that's not what she feels moved to do, she could, but it could start with just making something for a niece, or making a dress for a neighbor who's having a hard time. But it really changes things when you start to feel like this isn't just something that amuses me personally, but it is my destiny to love the world in this particular way. And isn't that a huge mindset shift?
Absolutely. Now, I know you work with a lot of people and you've taken them through this process over and over and over. And so one of the things that I was really curious about is, as you work with these people, what have you noticed was like the big problem? Like, was it more they didn't know what their blue flame was and they have just lost hope in finding it? Or was it more they kind of know what it is, but they're scared to pursue it? Or more like they don't know how to make time for it with all of their current obligations? Or maybe they're just afraid of change. Like where are you seeing most people fall into, or is it all over?
The vast majority, 80%, say, I don't know what my blue flame is, or they just straight up say, I don't have a blue flame. But what I find over and over again when we dig deep on that is it's not that they really don't think they have a blue flame. It's that they're afraid that they do. And they are afraid that they would feel a sense of obligation to put themselves out there if they're like, I was a really great public speaker in high school. And if they connect with that, it's like, oh, well, wait a minute. What does that mean? Like, do I need to be volunteering to give speeches at my church? Should I offer to maybe head up some things at my kid's school? And I think that sense of fear of putting ourselves out there blocks us from asking honest questions about what we were really meant to do.
Gotcha. I love that. Now, I was listening to an interview that you yesterday, and you said something that was also really important that I wanted to just see if you would take a minute to share is, on top of discovering your blue flame, you need to also understand what type of pressure you can handle. Like some people, you were talking about how like you and your husband, right? Like you can, you're not afraid to make some humongous change overnight if that's what it takes.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, like they don't have that in them. And so could you just speak a little bit about that awareness?
Yes. And I'm super passionate about this because depending on what social circles you're in, you will feel pressure to live at a very specific tempo of life. I call it like the speed of life, meaning, do you have 10 meetings a day and you're burning the candle at both ends, or are you sipping lemonade on your front porch? Those are kind of the two extremes. So when I worked in the high tech world for a while, and there was this idea in that world that if you're not living a very high pressure life where you go to the CrossFit gym at 5 a.m., your first business meeting is at 6 a.m., and then you've got different classes and you're watching your master class and then you're running your business and you're making millions. There was this idea that if you're not living that kind of super high pressure, intense life, well, you're afraid, you're not trying hard enough, you're not living life to the fullest. Then I got in stay-at-home mom circles. And in that world, there was this idea, if you're not taking everything off of your plate and just having as many quiet moments as possible to sit on your front porch and watch the birds and sip lemonade and just have long sessions of just reading and quiet things, then you're not really dedicated to motherhood. Like if you're not trying to live a very slow pace of life, turning off the TV and reading classic literature with your kids, if you're not into that, then, well, someone doesn't love their kids as much as the rest of us. Like I really felt that. Because this was when blogging was a big thing. So that was was the culture of the stay-at-home mom blog world. And I actually thought I had clinical depression for a while. And I started to think, maybe I don't know if I can stay home with kids. And it was weird because it didn't feel right for me to get back into the workforce just for, it's nothing else, like childcare would be so expensive. So I was like, it doesn't feel, just for me personally, I don't think it's the right path to go back into the workforce, but I'm losing my mind. Like I am just, when I go to bed at night, I dread the next day. Like I'm not looking forward to the next day. And for me, a large part of the fix was, honestly, John, I just needed to turn up the pressure. I am someone who thrives under pressure. And so I was writing my first book at the time, and I didn't have a publisher. I didn't have a contract, but I just set some deadlines for myself. Like, you know what? Hey, it's Wednesday, it's Thursday, it's Friday, whatever. I'm going to finish this chapter by Sunday. Like I'm going to get this done, this new chapter in 3 days. And I just put all this pressure on myself, and I just came alive. Yeah. I started going to bed earlier so that I could kill it more the next day. So that was a big lesson for me, and that I want everyone to take away. If someone's working in the high tech world and they're like, I don't want to get up at 5 a.m. and go to the gym. Like, I don't want to live this high pressure life. I want to sip lemonade on my front porch. They need to feel permission to buck that trend and say, you know what? I thrive at a slower tempo of life. And I'm not going to apologize for that. And I'm going to bring that into my life.
Man, I love that you said that. Believe it or not, so 2 podcast episodes ago, for my 30th, I released a solo episode. And the whole episode was on understanding your environment, or creating the right environment where you thrive. And I go into a lot of detail. It's just understanding, do you work better under pressure, or when you have the ability to pace yourself, morning or evening, at home, or away from home. It's just like everybody has this environment like which brings out like their max potential. And so one of the things that I mentioned in that episode is like, are you a Game of Thrones fan? Do you ever watch Game of
Yeah,
Thrones?
I am.
So the example that I used was Arya, Macy Williams. And so, I use her as an example because, she was 12 years old when that show started filming. And, you look at her today, she's 21. She's this big activist. She is building a tech startup. She is a super accomplished actress, public speaker. And it's just crazy because you look at like, how was somebody 21 years old speaking like they're the CEO of some huge company? And it's just because she was in an environment, with Game of Thrones where excellence was expected and that forced.
Yeah.
So I love that you covered that. So I want to talk about just for the next few minutes before we wrap up is a little bit about your big change. So when you had your radio show, how long did you have that for?
5 years.
So you had it 5 years. You were doing a great job. You're comfortable. Like, was it scary to just quit cold turkey like that?
Oh, it was hugely scary, especially that's where the benefits for our family came from. It was hugely scary. And one of the things I always tell people is that learning to trust your gut, it's like playing a sport in the sense that you get better the more you practice it. And I wouldn't have made that move 15 years ago, but when you learn to trust your gut, or for those of us who are believers, trust where God is calling you, or however you want to describe it, it is something, it is a skill that you can develop. I think that some people think, well, I just don't know what my gut instinct is. I wouldn't know when to go with my gut or when I think God's leading me somewhere. But if you try to get better at this, you will start to trust that process more and more and more, especially if you do some journaling. And so I always recommend to people, if you don't have experience with going on gut instinct and trusting God, maybe try it in the small things. Maybe don't just up and quit your job tomorrow. Just try, things like, should I host a dinner party? Or, so you get some inspiration and you think, well, is that a good gut instinct or is that just me being insane? Like, let me think about that. And so I really recommend that people start in the small things. Also, again, journaling, actually writing this stuff down is tremendously helpful because you can look back and say, oh, wow, okay, actually, that's interesting that I went with my gut instinct on that and it ended up being a complete disaster and brought nothing but like discord and craziness to my life. Okay, so when I feel that way next time, that's a sign that I should pause and take more time to reflect. But when you do it in the small things, you start to be able to be more bold in the big things. And so I recommend that people just make this a process in your life. Trust your gut instinct, see how it works out, and learn to get better at it.
I love that. Now, when you quit the radio show, was it for comedy? Was it for your book, speaking? Like what did you actually, it was for all of those things?
Well, it was primarily for comedy because the stand-up comedy tour is something that it just works so well. I'm really excited about it. It's where my heart is. So I will continue to do regular speaking engagements. I'll continue to write books. That's definitely part of what I feel like I can add value on. But my primary thing is stand-up comedy. And again, this is a crazy time to be doing that since it's, lots going on in the world. And that's where the gut instinct came in, that it made sense to quit my job when I first started thinking about doing it in January of 2020, when everything was going well and I was selling out shows and it was all incredible. It made sense back then, but it didn't make as much sense once COVID hit, but that gut instinct was still there, that it was the time to do it. And so I'll be totally honest that I don't fully have a plan for how this is going to work out, but my gut strongly said that it was the right move anyway.
Man, I think you're going to do really well. My favorite author on the planet, I don't know if you've ever heard of Andy Andrews. Have you ever heard of him?
No, I need to look him up. Why haven't I heard of this?
He's incredible. He wrote The Traveler's Gift. He's probably written 10 books. And I mean, they're some of the best personal growth books I've ever read. It's just, they're so good. But he was in comedy and he blended the two. But what ended up happening is it just made him, like his stand-up mixed with his personal growth, it just made him one of the best storytellers in the world.
Oh, that's
and I think you're absolutely on the right track. And I don't even know if I can like relate as well as like a mom, because I just think it's so inspirational, right? Like for someone to have 6 kids, to be pursuing and making changes on that level. We have 3 daughters, me and my fiance, and she struggles with that, right? Like she's in real estate, and it's always like, how do I balance being a provider with chasing my dreams? And I just I think you have a huge audience, and I think your comedy and the fact that you're inspiring people simultaneously with your writing, I think you're going to have a massively, massively successful career doing that. I just really believe that. So
thank you. Well, this is a time when I could use that encouragement. So I'm really blessed that you said that, and thank you so much.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, this is a test. It's been a hell of a 2020, hasn't it?
I feel like that. Speaking of Game of Thrones, you know how at the end of the year on social media, they'll do the year in review? The 2020 year in review is going to be like a season of Game of Thrones.
Like, seriously, I agree with you. I just cannot believe, locusts are tearing up Africa, and you've got it's just been a wild, wild year, and I can't believe it. Now, as we wrap up, is there a big takeaway that you want to leave with the audience that's listening to this? And then we'll talk about how to connect, but is there like one big takeaway from your book or from everything that you do now, like that you want to leave people with if they're listening to you?
Yeah, what I want to leave people with is you do have a blue flame and it matters. Because that's the second thing people think is they think, well, maybe I have a blue flame, but mine's lame. I'm not some great podcaster like John. I'm not doing a stand-up comedy. It doesn't matter. Right. If maybe for you, it's like collecting flowers and, making really beautiful bouquets, but you're not going to start a flower shop. You're not going to start some high impact business. And so you start to think, my contribution doesn't matter. And I would say that judgment call is not up to you. Again, as a believer, I think these are God-given gifts, and therefore you don't have a choice. Like if God gave you this gift, he means for you to put it out there. Or for my atheist friends, it's just something that you have. It is a unique way that you can contribute that no one else can contribute in that way. And so that bouquet of flowers that you pick and you drop off with the neighbor, nobody else could have done that because that is your unique calling. So I want to emphasize to every single person listening, you do have a blue flame. You were meant to use it, and it matters.
That's awesome. And congratulations, by the way. Your book is crushing it on Amazon. It was when I looked, it was the top 10.
Oh yeah. It's been doing really well. And the Today Show helped. I got on the Today Show. So Hoda was personally like, I love this book. I'm buying this book. So.
That's awesome. And I'm going to put all the links in the show notes, but could you just share with everybody, like, what is the best way to connect with you, follow your content, follow your work, and just stay on top of what you're currently working on and your tour dates and all of that?
Yeah, I'd love for people to connect. So my new podcast, I'm very excited about this, going from talk radio to podcasting. It is called This is Jen. I'd love for people to look up the podcast. And my website is thejfshow.com. That has all the link, thejfshow.com. Or actually, you know what? I'll just give you the blue flame. Yourblueflame.com. That's easier to remember.
Perfect.
Yourblueflame.com. And that can connect you to all of my social media and my email list and all that.
Awesome. And congrats also on your podcast, crushing it, ranking as well.
Yeah.
That's
when you come from talk radio, it's like,
right.
it's a whole different world. I love having the creative freedom. So I'm having a blast with my podcast.
That's awesome. Well, Jennifer, I cannot tell you how much fun and how big of a pleasure it was to have you on today. You shared some just incredible wisdom and knowledge. And guys, if you're listening, trust me, you need to go pick up her book, Your Blue Flame. It is absolutely incredible. Even the first chapter when she goes into her story, it's just incredible. Get the book right away, read it. It's actually a really easy read, like, believe it or not. I was surprised I was able to finish. I'm going to finish the rest of it by today. It's a great read, and it's a page turner.
I tried to make it the book. Like, I'm too busy to read a lot right now, so I thought I'm going to write the book that I want to read.
one word per page.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much again for being on the show. It was just an absolute pleasure to have you.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure and an honor to be here.
Thank you. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that awesome episode with Jennifer, and I really hope she sparks something in you that will give you a push that you need to go grab her book. It's everywhere. It's on Amazon. And, you know, it's crazy, but I truly agree with her. I really, really believe that we have, all of us, we all have this blue flame or this spark or whatever you want to call it. There's a million titles for it, but we have this thing inside of us that you know what you're meant to do. You're meant to do something big or important, but so many people, they put that spark on the back burner and they make excuses for not pursuing their dreams and the thing that just really gives us energy. I had a mentor one day share some really great advice with me that I want to share with you. And this is what he said. When you're trying to figure out if this is what you're meant to do versus not what you're not meant to do, he said this. He's like, a simple way to gauge it is ask yourself, does doing it give you energy or take it away from you? Do you feel alive and excited after doing it, or do you feel tired and drained? And he said, if you just use that as your North Star, you are on the right track. Now, before I let you guys go, I just want to ask you all for a big favor. One last thing. If you have not left us a review, sorry, I don't know why I'm saying us. Me. This is a solo podcast. I don't even have any helpers on this podcast, so I'm solo. If you have not left me or the podcast a review, it would really mean a lot to me. If you enjoyed it, if you get something out of it, please take 1 or 2 minutes and just go leave it a 5-star on Apple, write something nice or encouraging. It would really, really mean a lot. Well, guys, that's all for today. You already know I will see you next week with another incredible guest. I hope all of you have a very fantastic week and take care, everyone.